Hello, and welcome to another Logic tutorial with me, Ed the Shed. My name is Ed, but I am not a shed. In this video I will go through the compressor plugin. Now, this is a very important plugin, and this tutorial is for those of you who still don't fully understand what you are doing when you mess around with the settings. This tutorial will have a lot of talking in it, so make sure you are comfortable and put your focus into this one as best as you can. I will go through each of the parameters and explain to you what they are doing. So, I will start to explain compression a little bit first. First, ask yourself, what do you do when you compress something? Let's say, for example, what do you do when you compress a snowball in your hands? You compress it by squeezing the snow together by pushing your top hand and bottom hand towards each other. Using another example, let's imagine we have a vise. Now if you want to compress something, you would put it in the vise and tighten it. This is compression. So, let's imagine that the vise is now our compressor. From now on I will refer to the compressor as a vise. Now, before I go on, I must warn you. Never call a compressor a vise. People will think that you are weird. So, I am now going to open our vise in Logic. This can be found in the Dynamics section in the Inserts. Okay, now we have our vise open, and, think of it like a vise. Imagine that we have put our audio in the vise ready to be compressed. I will go through the parameters one by one and explain what the vise will do when you use them. Let's start with the threshold, which is this slider here. This slider is asking you, what volume does the audio have to be, until the vise starts compressing it. Now, I have placed this audio sample in the vise, but let's just quickly listen to it without the vise compressing it at all. Okay, now, as I bring the threshold down, you will notice that the gain reduction meter starts signaling and showing metering. This meter is telling us how much audio the vise is compressing. So, let's see how far we have to bring the slider down until we see the meter start showing us something. So, you see now that I have brought the slider down to around 6 dB, there is a tiny bit of reading showing on the meter. So this is telling us that from this point onwards, the more we bring the slider down, the more the audio will be reduced. But don't forget, this meter is just asking us what volume the audio has to be before we compress it, not how much we are compressing it by. Right, let's talk about the attack knob. This is basically asking you, how quickly do you want the vise to compress the audio? So in other words, how quickly do you want the vise to close after it hears the audio? Now, in the opposite effect, the release is asking you how quickly you want the vise to open back up after it has closed up on the sound. If you tick the auto box above, this will choose the appropriate release setting for the audio being used. Be warned, this setting is not always completely accurate. The next parameter after this is quite important. This is the ratio. I won't get too technical about this in this tutorial, but this works in conjunction with the threshold, and it lets you choose how much compression you want to apply. So high ratios such as 7:1, will have a much more drastic effect and more typical ratios, like 2:1. Next up is the gain parameter. Now let's go back to the example of compressing the snowball in our hands. Now, we have two hands and each of these two hands corresponds to a parameter on our compressor. So, when you are compressing a snowball, your top hand is essentially the compressor threshold, which is compressing the top half of the snowball. The gain. This is essentially your bottom hand, which is compressing the snowball up towards the middle instead of down, like the threshold. So now imagine the audio is a snowball. By bringing the threshold down and by bringing the gain up, we are squashing the snowball, so it's more compact and evenly rounded. This is exactly what you are doing by compressing. You are reducing the audio that is too loud, and you are boosting the audio that isn't loud enough. This makes your audio as a whole a lot more even in volume. As a general rule, however much reduction is showing on the meter, is how much gain you should apply back into the compressor. Finally, I will very briefly cover the knee parameter. This slider basically lets you choose how harshly the compression comes into the sound. If the knee is all the way down set to 0, then this means that compression will only begin when the audio rises above the set threshold. If, on the other hand, the knee control is brought all the way over to the right to the value of 1, this means that a slight amount of compression will start to occur even before the audio rises above the threshold. The effect of this causes the compression to sound smoother and less sudden and harsh. Right, that is all you need to know in this tutorial. I will now just run through everything quickly just to recap on what we have learned. I will run through the typical route I take when I am using the compressor plugin. Okay, so first I will usually set my threshold until I can see a bit of reduction showing up on the meter. Remember, this is our top hand on the snowball. Let's do this now. Next I will set my attack setting. To recap, this is setting how quickly you want the compression to start. After this is the release knob, and this lets you choose how long it will take for the compression to stop. Now we set the ratio. This lets us choose how strong the compression is going to be. Now we can go back and have a little fiddle with our threshold slider until we are happy. Then let's look at how much reduction is happening on the meter. In this case I will bring it down to show between 2 and 3 dB reduction. So now we know this, let's head over to our gain parameter. Remember, this is the bottom hand on our snowball. So, as we can see that there is between 2 and 3 dB of reduction, we will add about 2.5 dB gain. I would suggest at this point not to worry about the knee controls too much. I will go through them in another compression tutorial where I will talk about compression settings. Boom selector. You have now successfully used the compressor plugin. I hope you have a better understanding of this important plugin now and try and use at least a small amount of compression on most of your tracks so your ears can get better at listening to the effects of the compressor. Thanks for watching and I will see you next time.